Hi everyone, welcome to another ShareWise webinar. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I have AdAlta. Joining me today is the Managing Director Tim Oldham. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining me today.
Caitlin, great to be here. Thanks for having us.
So today Tim's going to do a presentation, and then following that, we'll do a Q&A. So for everyone that's joining us live, please feel free to pop your questions into the Q&A box in the toolbar down below, and we'll get through them. But I'll hand it off to you, Tim.
Great. Thanks, Caitlin, and welcome everybody this morning. My prepared remarks are not going to be particularly long. Those of you who are familiar with the company will have seen a much longer version of this in the past. But I did want, for the benefit of those who may be new to the story, just to give a very quick overview of the company, where we're going, and then the Q&A will allow us to explore some of those themes in a bit more detail. So AdAlta is a listed drug discovery company. We're actually moving more and more of our programs towards clinical stage. And so the theme of our current period of strategy is about building out our clinical stage pipeline. I'm making public forward-looking comments here, so the usual disclaimers apply to publicly listed companies. But I really wanted to introduce AdAlta and our emerging three business units. We're built upon our unique drug discovery platform, which we call our iBodies. Our iBodies are a unique antibody-like molecule that enables us to do things and address disease targets and ultimately diseases where traditional monoclonal antibodies have been unsuccessful. If you like, we're aiming to go where antibodies cannot. We can think about our business in our discovery business, which is the history of AdAlta through to now. And this is where we use that iBody platform to discover novel drug candidates against some of these debilitating diseases, progress them through early stages of discovery and preclinical development to the point where they're ready to advance them into the clinic. Our product development business takes those lead candidates and then progresses them through early stage clinical trials. And today we have two parts to our product development business. The first is AdCella, which is focusing on our most advanced internally developed asset, which we call AD214. This is focused on fibrosis and inflammation. What we're aiming to do here is create new hope for the 500,000 patients around the world today who are essentially living under a death sentence because there are no good therapies for a disease called idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. This is scarring of your lungs. Ultimately leads to a reduction in respiratory capacity, and patients ultimately suffocate and die. We spend $5 billion a year on drugs for this disease that don't work. There is a desperate need for new therapies. AD214 is our contribution to a potential solution for this huge, desperately needy patient population. The second product development business we're building is called AdCella. This is focused on the field of cellular immunotherapy. What we're aiming to do here is to use human immune cells as a living drug to treat cancer and potentially other diseases. And we've just launched our east to west cellular immunotherapy strategy, where we're aiming to leverage the massive amounts of innovation that are happening in this field across Asia, where we can leverage our time zone, our world-class ecosystem here in Australia for delivering clinical trials and manufacturing of these incredibly complicated products. And what we're aiming to do is bring those into a Western regulated environment, and in doing so, add significant value of clinical stage assets very, very quickly. So they're the three parts to our business today. And we succeed ultimately when we develop product candidates through AdAlta or products through AdCella and AdCella to the point where larger biopharmaceutical companies are willing to out-license or invest in those assets, crystallizing the value and generating a cash revenue return to AdAlta's shareholders. We think there's significant near-term momentum behind AdAlta, which is why we think it's a great time to be looking at AdAlta as a shareholder. We have a really attractive valuation, given the pipeline that we have. Our enterprise value is just 11 million Australian dollars, market cap of around 15 or 16. and we have sufficient cash to get us through the next period of inflection points. We have momentum developing towards a return on AD214 and the investment we've made in that to date through AdCella. And we've completed a phase 1 clinical extension study in March that's got this asset now ready for phase 2. We have multiple partnering strategies in play to fund that phase 2 program through AdCella. And we believe that when that investment starts to flow through and becomes visible to shareholders, they'll truly understand the underlying value of this asset. Assets for idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis are routinely commanding upfront payments of $45 million and up. That compares very, very favorably with our current market capitalization. But AdCella is not the only program we're working on. I've mentioned our east to west cellular immunotherapy strategy, and this has been put in place to develop a near-term clinical stage pipeline coming in behind AD214. We already have a collaboration with local venture capital firm Synthesis Bioventures to launch AdCella, and this is providing, as I mentioned earlier, that pathway for innovation in Asian cellular immunotherapy to reach global markets through a market in Australia that is regulated and recognised by the US Food and Drug Administration and the European Medicines Agency. We've also appointed Cell Therapies as our preferred manufacturer, and we're working through a pipeline of really exciting initial assets to bring into that subsidiary. And so you can see that we've really got some significant transaction opportunities that are going to, we believe, unlock the value inherent in AD214 and really emphasize the true value of the iBody platform. So we have all the foundations in place to enable our transaction pipeline to drive growth. AdCella, with its lead asset AD214, is heading to phase 2 in a $4 to $5 billion market with multiple other indication extensions. And the partnering window, financing window for that is very much in play at the moment. Our cellular therapy strategy with AdCella is leveraging both regional advantages and iBody advantages in a high growth sector with high unmet needs to create a distinctive business with new and novel competitive advantage. We have a team in place who can deliver all of this. We've already delivered clinical trials for AD214. We've already demonstrated all the stages of drug development from discovery through until the clinic, and we have established partnerships to help drive those businesses forward. We've got an incredibly strong and supportive institutional and large shareholder register. We've got flexible financing facilities in place to bridge us through those transaction windows, and we believe we have a very attractive valuation relative to the commercial value of our pipeline. So I'm really looking forward to a discussion with you today. With that, I'll hand back to Caitlin to facilitate the Q&A discussion.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was a really good overview of the company and a good introduction for our clients that weren't familiar with the company beforehand. So I know a lot of people have joined us throughout the presentation. So in case you missed it, please feel free to pop your questions for Tim into the Q&A box below. But we've got quite a few pre-submitted already, so I'll get us started. The first question is, in preparing the FDA proposal for the phase 2 study, what disclosures or commitments does one have to make about the funding of the trial and the financial viability of the company and partnership to see the trial to completion?
There's a lot in that question. I guess the first one would be to say that the US Food and Drug Administration is concerned primarily and firstly with the safety of the potential drug, and then secondly with its potential efficacy. In other words, is the drug likely to first do no harm? And secondly, is there a reasonable chance of success? They're not actually interested in, does the company have the financial wherewithal in order to progress that study, right? So in terms of FDA approvals, they don't require you to have a certain amount of money in your bank in order to do that. In fact, we've seen many examples where companies raise money in the middle of a trial to complete the study. From a tactical point of view, obviously, we don't want to start a study that we can't finish.
Yeah, of course.
And this is why, one of the reasons why we've actually created AdCella in the first place. Our core AdAlta shareholders have invested in AD214 to get it to the point it is today. And we set the expectation with those shareholders that they would not be financing the phase 2 program. And obviously, we're increasing the amount of money that's required in order to do that, as is normal in drug development. And so what we've done with AdCella is create an entity that holds 8214's intellectual property and enables us to pursue two different strategies in order to fund phase 2. One would be a classic out licensing to big pharmaceutical companies that will lock in the value of 8214 for us today, but would potentially crystallize and generate a cash inflow for AdAlta. The second one is that we bring third-party investment into AdSolus for people who are interested in taking risk on those larger phase 2 clinical trials, not interested in the discovery work that we're doing, not interested in exposure to the ASX, not interested in the work we're doing in cell therapies, solely focused on this type of investment. And that's a different type and class of investor than we have in either our existing shareholder base or that we're discussing for AdCella.
Okay.
The investment that they would make in AdSolus, of course, then puts a value in AdSolus, which we are anticipating will be significantly, AdAlta's share of AdSolus will be significantly higher than our current market capitalization today, we believe.
Okay. And have any of your drug candidates now progressed from the preclinical to clinical stage?
So as we've spoken about, 8214 is our first product that we've taken through into clinical. We've now completed 2 phase 1 clinical trials for 8214. And that's been important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, we've now demonstrated the safety and tolerability of 8214 in healthy volunteers. This is really important and a big step when you go from preclinical to the first in human. There are plenty of drugs that don't make that step, and so that was a huge milestone for us. Not only did we demonstrate the safety of the drug, we also are able to understand its availability and its distribution in the blood of healthy volunteers. And that we're able to then line up with our preclinical and pharmacokinetic modeling of the drug to enable us to confirm that what we're seeing in patients or in people was matching up with what we needed to see in order to be ensure that the drug was likely to be effective in a phase 2 clinical trial. Remember that in an animal study, we can dose as frequently as we like. It's really important when we go into a phase 2 clinical trial that we are dosing at a dosing regimen and interval that's going to be used clinically. 8214 is administered intravenously. We don't want to have a patient coming in too frequently to get an intravenous administration in a hospital. That just won't work. And so we don't have a product unless we can extend that dosing interval out to at least 2 weeks, is what our market research is telling us. And so it was really important in that phase 1 program that we're able to demonstrate that, yes, indeed, 8214 could be administered every 2 weeks and still deliver the amount of engagement with its target that is needed in order to be effective. So that was the second really important thing. And the third one was we're able to demonstrate that the iBody platform itself doesn't have inherent safety concerns either. So not only does it validate 8214 and get it ready for phase 2, those clinical studies have successfully demonstrated at least proof of principle, the safety of the platform as a whole for other applications. Now, the question around have we got assets into the clinic is a really important one, because for a listed company at the moment, value really only accrues to companies with clinical stage pipelines and as you move through clinical stage milestones. So it's really, really important that we have a robust clinical stage pipeline. This is why we've created our AdCella business unit to focus on in-licensing cellular immunotherapies, which will be, in many cases, will already have clinical data in Asian markets. And will rapidly move in a period of 18 to 24 months through a clinical trial in Australia. The future pipelines then will incorporate, hopefully, the iBody platform in the future pipelines of our partners. But the important thing is that we're getting more assets in the clinic faster, because this is the way we create value for shareholders as rapidly as possible.
Okay. A few questions coming in. Hi, Tim. Are you leaning towards co-developing 8214 as opposed to selling it off?
Look, I think we're continuing to keep our options open on how we progress 8214. There's a certain attractiveness around licensing it out now because we would likely get a significant upfront milestone. But we're also realizing that the value uplift through a successful phase 2 trial is significant. It could be 7 to 10 times increase in value. And so if we were to hold on to an ownership share of AD214 rather than just a licensing step, a licensing contract, we'll actually ride an increase in value, a much greater increase in value as we get through phase 2. And those who've been following us for some time will know I've been at various stages leaning one way or another towards licensing versus holding onto the asset. That in part reflects where the relative valuations are sitting. We want to do a deal, the right deal, as I keep saying, so that we maximize shareholder value. It's also around where's the capital and the cash coming from. And so at the moment, I think coming out of the most recent round of partnering discussions at the Bio conference in San Diego, if anything, I'm leaning slightly towards co-developing AD214, but we still do have pharma companies we're in discussions with who are looking at taking a license to the asset as a whole.
Okay. And we have another question that's related to that and mentioning the San Diego conference. And I think, so I'll read it out. Good morning. Tim recently updated his LinkedIn account after the Bio 24 conference in San Diego by stating 4 days of partnering strategy have materially advanced our AD214 partnering strategy. While I appreciate commercial discussions are confidential, however, Tim's update with using the words materially advanced point to some development. Can you please elaborate on this?
Yes. So we went into the San Diego conference, and for those who don't know, Bio is the world's largest industry partnering conference. It's an annual event that the industry gathers in either Boston or San Diego, essentially to create commercial collaborations between pharma companies and their vendors and suppliers. 20,000 people there. We had 52 partnering meetings across the 4 days. And a number of other ad hoc interactions through receptions and functions and networking events. Around about a quarter of those conversations were related to AD214. Around about a quarter were related to AdCella. And then there were some additional conversations around vendors who can help us advance our patient-friendly subcutaneous version of AD214. And the last set of conversations were largely around investments and capital markets advisors, just to get a sense of where funding is available for down the track. In relation to AD214, we went into the conversation expecting to continue dialogue with existing partners in our pipeline. What we were surprised by was the significant number of new inbound inquiries from companies that we had not previously had contact with. And several of these were brand new companies that are incredibly well funded, that have just emerged and are looking for assets exactly at the stage that AD214 is at. So two companies, for example, companies that have just come out of what's called stealth mode. They've been building their business under the radar screen without public announcements. They came out of stealth mode in the last 3 to 6 months. They're actively looking for assets at the phase 1 stage. One of them has $400 million in backing from venture capital firms already, for example, and they're looking for a pipeline. So this is reflecting the amount of capital that venture capital raised last year and is now seeking to deploy in the private markets, which is the benefit of having AdCella sitting as a private entity, not as a public entity. It was conversations like that it gave me confidence that not only we're progressing our existing pipeline, we now have partners who've approached us, found us, looking specifically for assets that exactly fit the profile. And when you walk out of a conversation where someone says, this would be a great first asset for us, that's a different level of conversation for a first conversation than we usually have.
Yeah.
And so when I say we materially advance, we've broadened the pipeline of companies that we're talking to and potential investors in AdCella we're talking to much more significantly than I would have expected, as well as being able to progress some of our existing conversations.
All right. Okay. And then we have some questions to do with AdCella. So the first one is, what would be some of the diseases that AdCella could be addressing?
So let's talk about the field of cellular immunotherapies for starters. This is a very, very new field where in recent years we've worked out how to harness a patient's own immune system and redirect it to go and fight cancer. So cancer essentially hides from our immune system, which is why it's so hard to treat. By programming our immune system, we can go and fight cancer. And now we're starting to extend that into other disease types, autoimmune diseases, for example. But essentially what we're doing is engineering, taking a patient's own immune cells or a donor's immune cells, engineering and expanding those in the laboratory and giving them back to the patient as a living drug, primarily to treat cancer. The early successes were in blood cancers, and these were outstanding successes in children with rare forms of leukemia who'd failed multiple lines, up to 6 lines of chemotherapy. We're getting 90 to 95% response rates. We're getting survival. The first patient treated in a clinical trial has just celebrated 12 years cancer-free. Single dose curative. We've never seen that sort of result in cancer before. Now, what we're trying to do with AdCella is advance a number of programs that are trying to work towards providing that same hope that exists in blood cancers into solid cancers. We're focused on cellular immunotherapies only. We're focused on solid cancers and potentially non-cancer indications. We're focused on assets that are originating from Asia, and that covers Japan, Korea, China, Australia, New Zealand. We are focused on assets that are what we call multifunctional. So this means they're not just engineering in a way to target the cancer, but they're engineering in functions that enable the immune cells to evade the defenses that cancer throws up. And this is where the iBody starts to play into the AdCella strategy. While the initial assets won't be iBody enabled, we believe the iBody is one of the smallest building blocks you can use to develop these multifunctional cell therapies that are important for cancer and for solid cancers. And so the other part of the partnerships we're looking for is partners who have the technology to engineer these immune cells, but can benefit from the iBody technology to either improve their targeting or to help overcome immune suppression. And so there is a synergy with the iBody platform down the track, but what was really important to us, as I said earlier, was ensuring we've got a clinical stage pipeline. And now AdCella leverages the innovation that's happening in Asia. 50% of the world's CAR T cell companies, for example, or cellular immunotherapy companies are currently based in China, with a fairly significant number in Korea, Japan, and Australia as well. 60% of the clinical trials in this field are happening in China today. Asia is the center of innovation for this new technology. Australia is the only market in the region that has an established cell therapy manufacturing and clinical ecosystem that is ready to essentially implement for these products. They need to come out of those Asian markets and generate clinical data in a Western regulated environment. We can do that in Australia at 20 to 30% lower cost than we can in the US under what's called an IND, investigational new drug application with the Food and Drug Administration. So we're getting that first Western data in a Western compliant manufacturing environment. That will add alone significant value to these assets, and we're getting great response from China and Korea for companies looking to achieve this. We can provide help to that, and then we bring the iBodies in later on to help further enhance their pipeline. So we believe this is playing to iBody's strengths, it's playing to Australia's strengths, it's playing to AdAlta's capabilities, and enables us to build a very reproducible and scalable business over time.
Yeah, okay. And I know you've just touched on this, but I don't know if there's anything you'd like to elaborate on. Is AdCella focusing purely on finding therapies to link to the iBody platform, or is it looking also for other therapies which are not linked to iBodies?
So we're very focused now. When we realized, sorry, let me start that question again. When we started solving the problem of how do we build a clinical stage pipeline, we looked at a whole range of modalities. The small molecules, other protein therapeutics, cell therapies. There's a whole bunch of applications. What we wanted to do was make sure that we had something that provided a sustainable competitive advantage, that provided continuity from product to product, and ultimately that had genuine synergies with AdAlta's business. That's why we ended up with cellular immunotherapies, because there is consistency, there is a competitive advantage. We're not fighting for assets in the US where there's lots of other people looking over those assets, and we'll always get asked the question, well, isn't that the fish that John West rejected, if you like? Someone in the US must have already looked at this. We are in the time zone. We are front and center with working with these companies. So we have the ability to secure assets preferentially, and we have the ability to feed that into our core iBody technology over time as well. So we're very much focused on building a business that has sustainable competitive advantage. We believe that the iBodies will be part of that. We know that the iBodies are ideally suited to cellular immunotherapies. And so, we already have a collaboration in that space with Carina Biotech here in Australia, for example. And so that strategic consistency is there, as well as simply building out what's an important financial strategy, which is clinical stage assets.
Okay. And to wrap up, what are the key development milestones AdAlta expects to realize over the next 12 months?
So obviously the big ones are transaction related, where we have a we have a near-term goal to finance phase 2 for AD214. Once that's achieved, we believe that shareholders will be able to see, and investors will be able to see the underlying value of that asset. And from there, we'll rapidly move into the final stages of preparing for the phase 2 clinical program. There is a toxicology study that needs to be completed. There is manufacturing of the drug for phase 2 that needs to be completed. All of these things are a cost that we don't want to incur until we're financed. So step 1 is finance the phase 2 clinical trial, however that may be. Then step 2 after that will be rapidly moving towards the preparation for the phase 2 clinical trial. And in case that is through AdCella and we are running that program, we're in the process of starting vendor selection so that we've already got all those contractors in place ready to roll. And the second big theme will be transactions around our AdCella business. We have, through our collaboration with Synthesis Bioventures, a commitment to work together to complete the due diligence on that asset pipeline I mentioned. There are about 8 to 10 assets we're diligencing at the moment, with the objective that in the next 6 to 12 months, we will secure the first 1 to 2 of those assets to really prove the potential of AdCella. And as soon as those first assets come in, we'll be looking to technology transfer those into manufacturing here, hence the collaboration with Cell Therapies. So it's all about transactions in the near term, the near 6-month window for us, followed by then execution of those clinical stage programs.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, with that being said, we'll end it here. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining me today. And thank you so much, everyone that submitted questions. If anyone wants to revisit this, we'll post the recording onto our YouTube later. But thank you so much, Tim, for your time.
Thank you, Caitlin. It's been great to be with you.